Hello everyone and welcome to this session of the Virtual Distilling Conference. We're greatly privileged to have Veronika Karlova with us. Hello Veronika.
Hello there, hello everyone.
And we are talking about flavoured and botanical vodka and why it's worth giving it a second look. Veronika, over to you.
Absolutely, David. So thank you very much for inviting me again to talk on vodka subject. And I think it is important to look at flavored category as a whole category, because we need, I'm sure you will agree with me, we need more clarity in the category. So that's why I think the second look it's a great topic, and we'll discuss further, and we're gonna taste some really good samples and talk about it a little bit more. So yes,
I guess like to sort of set the scene, because some people might be saying, why on earth are they talking about flavoured vodka? Flavoured vodka's donut flavored and birthday cake flavored and electricity flavored and all this kind of thing. I mean, that's fair to say. Would you like there's been a big boom of flavored vodkas sort of in the last 10-20 years. Some of them are good, some of them are not so good.
I absolutely agree, David. So I think 10 years ago, when you said word flavored vodka, it would most probably apply to vodka flavored with marshmallows or Skittles, but these days I don't think that is the case, especially with craft movement. You know, we're looking more into terms like botanical vodka. What does it actually mean, botanical vodka, or infused, or even aged, if you like? So I think we need to look into all these separate categories and see actually how they are making it. How is flavor vodka made? Because it's not just by adding natural or artificial flavors anymore. There is certain processes and techniques that are followed, and you know, that's how flavor vodka is created these days. So
for sure.
So I think before we talk and taste some really good samples today, we should look a little bit more into history and what it actually meant, you know, when you said flavor vodka, because traditionally flavor vodka was more created because of medicinal purposes. So if you don't mind, I'll just quickly share my screen, and we can look at some traditional approaches of you know, flavoring or like infusing vodka. So as you will probably agree with me, the first distillers were, well, I mean, as the literature suggests, the first distiller were most probably Russian or Polish monks who were producing so-called aqua vitae, you know, but that was primarily for medicinal purposes, and they were using all the local flavors they could find, which was most probably honey, fruits, spices, herbs, and berries. So by the 16th century, more flavors were introduced, like pepper, sandalwood, anise, and so on. So I think we should mention Russia, because in the Soviet era, vodka was often considered as a cure for everything. And I remember that, you know, me growing up in Slovakia, that was exactly the same. People were saying a tall glass with 2 teaspoons of black pepper was what, you know, would cure everything, any colds. So. And then another historical point of view that we should mention is the one from Poland, you know, because Poland alone, by the 16th century, there was at least 72 different herbal vodkas available. And, you know, I mean, we definitely have to mention the most iconic vodka from Poland, Żubrówka, you know, dating back to 16th century, and we all know that Żubrówka is flavored from with bison grass, and it is actually, you know, the geographical indication and origin that the herbal vodka from the North Podlasie lowland region only only that can be called bison grass vodka. But it's not just bison grass that people in Poland are famous for. There are other famous flavored brands, which include Krupnik, for example, that's a honey one, Pieprzowka, which is flavored with black pepper, Żołądkowa Gorzka, which is actually known to be bitter vodka for the stomach. So if you had any digestion problems, you would have a shot of Gorzka, and it would help you to with digestion problems. So again, with for example, Żołądkowa Gorzka, it's a secret recipe, so it is mixture of dried fruits, herbs and spices, but they don't really disclose what it is. And another interesting fact to mention is with Polish and Russian distilling tradition. So they have something called nalewka or nastoyka in Russia. So it's kind of nalewka as vodka is known that it was created by macerating and infusing various ingredients in alcohol, which like we still use it these days, and that was very popular. The only difference between nalewka and nastoyka was that nalewka, the Polish one, were usually stronger, something between 40-45 ABV strength, where the Russian one was normally mixed with sugar and water, around 20% ABV. So. And now we're moving into modern approach, David, because as we already said, people are experimenting with botanicals, with different flavors. Lately in the vodka category, botanical and savory approaches are becoming much more popular. But before we talk about it, I think it's very important to mention the legal definition and the difference between EU and the US.
Yep. Well, I totally agree. And it's interesting that because, of course, the regulations in the EU have changed quite recently, and they're just about to come into force, I think in April, But looking at the definitions that you've got here, the big thing that strikes me is that in the US, where normal neutral vodka has to be at least 40% ABV, the flavored vodkas, as is the same with all the different flavored gins and brandies and stuff, only has to be 30% ABV, whereas in the EU it's 37.5 for everything.
Yes, absolutely. So that's the definition, as we can see. And also I would mention, the flavor vodka is, if it's sweetened, the final product shall contain less than 100 grams of sweetened products per liter in EU, whereas in the US we don't have a specific definition.
Yeah.
So moving into our next slide. So I created a little slide for you to see, how actually flavor vodka is seen at the moment. So we have a flavor vodka category, which we already talked about. It's either EU legal definition and US legal definition. Within that category, we do have a category as whole called infused, which I put together a little definition of infused vodka, which is a vodka that has been flavored through the distillation and maceration of natural plant materials, not extracts, and any color is the result of post distillation maceration of real plant materials. So that's kind of like a very, very general definition, and it doesn't limit that. It can be more specific if we want to. But within that infused vodka category, we do have category botanical, and I think it's important to mention aged because it's becoming more popular as well. So botanical vodka is a vodka that has been flavored through the distillation or maceration of real botanicals, not extracts. And again, any color is the result of post-distillation maceration of real botanicals. And with aged vodka, a vodka that has been rested or matured in a non-neutral wood barrel from which it extracts flavors and colors. So that would be, again, very simple definition, but we need to have some sort of definition to kind of understand the category. So hope that's,
this is all about describing the categories and things. It's not about having a legal definition for them. It's more just about a way of identifying the different ways that people make things. And I think even with things like the aged vodka. I know we've talked about it before, but so like some people say barrels, but then other people say, well, actually, there are other ways of getting that wood influence in there. Could be staves, could be chips and things like that. And of course, some woods that might be good won't necessarily, you can't necessarily make them into barrels, or they'll be very leaky or something like that. I think the color is a really interesting one as well, because you get kind of a combination of things where people are adding some color and things where it's the totally natural one. And of course, anything that's a natural color typically will change after time. So there is always this like balance between the consistency for color versus not adding the color, that sort of more holistic approach that some people might look at it as.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. So that's why I think we are here today talking about it, that we're not saying this is how it is. We are saying that this is kind of basics, what we know. And I think that the category needs more clarity and needs more exploring. So as you said,
just the start of the conversation, really, isn't it?
Exactly. Yes.
But let's have that conversation.
Perfect. So moving on to let's talk a little bit more about flavors, because obviously that's all what it is about. And I created for you a little kind of flavor wheel for you to see, what kind of categories we have within the flavor category. So, we've got spices, herbs, then we've got fruits, again, aged or smoked, vegetables, honey, flowers, wood or trees or nuts, sweet, sugar, anything you can possibly think of. And I kind of like just stated the most popular ones, but that you can see, for example, these days you see a lot of seafood flavored vodkas, oyster, caviar flavored, you have truffle flavored bacon. I'm pretty sure, David, you can name a few that that you tried, and they were very unique flavors.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I guess because with vodka you get that blank canvas. Looking at the flavors on here, you're getting flavored products that you wouldn't necessarily get in other spirits. I mean, like the fruity things like cherry and peach, yeah, you can get whiskies that are flavored with those, and rums and gins and stuff, but I don't think I've ever seen a bacon gin. I've seen several bacon vodkas, but I don't think I've seen a bacon gin. It's quite interesting how a lot of the flavors of vodka are very much inspired directly by food, not just by like plants, but by food, like things like the Pavlova. I know there's the Old Youngs, isn't it? They're Pavlova vodka from Australia, which is pretty incredible because it basically tastes like Pavlova, which for those that don't know is a kind of fruit and cream and meringue thing, and it tastes spot on. So I think people like that, it's just very exciting, the different sort of flavors that they're producing.
Yeah, and I think, even to achieve something like that, like a Pavlova dessert flavor, there is a lot of science and experimenting behind, because it's not just you add this one flavor, it's kind of mixing flavors together, because you have to get creaminess, you have to get strawberries, you have to get all those sweet notes. So yeah, it's not so easy as one would think. So I also prepared a little slide on the flavor components and common spices and herbs, David, because I think it's important that we understand that there are certain chemical compounds behind certain aromas and flavors.
Absolutely fascinating. And also when you're making gin as well, but having some understanding of this, you don't need to be a chemist, is really helpful. And that's partly because you start to look at some of the terpenes and that, and you'll see certain ingredients will have some of the same components, and then you can think, oh well, they'll probably go quite well together. So like the limonene and things, you've got that in citrus fruit, but it's also in some other botanicals as well. The linalool, which is in lily of the valleys, also in coriander. So like if you wanted to go down that route, that's quite good as well. And you get some limonene there as well. And then the pinenes is also, you get a lot of pinenes in juniper, but then you get some in some of these other botanicals as well. So I think just a very basic knowledge is really nice to just understand where certain flavors come from, because particularly if you're doing more than one botanical, more than one flavor, things will interact and you will start to get different flavors. And so you might be like, well, where's this kind of citrusy note coming from? I'm not using any citrus. Oh, well, I'm using coriander or something. That might be where the citrus comes from.
Definitely, definitely. So, I mean, you know, if you want to go through charts, or if anyone afterwards, you know, would like me to send the presentation out, I'm more than happy to do that, so that can explore more in details. So let's move on to, I think, the most important part of our talk, and that is flavoring vodka, and what does it actually mean to flavor vodka, and how do we do it? So I just prepared a little definition, which I think kind of characterizes the main aspects of flavoring. So it's a process of adding flavor to ethyl alcohol of agricultural origin or neutral spirit, and flavoring it with either natural plant materials such as herbs, fruits, fruit juice, you know, cream, chocolate, or steam distilled essential oils, or either, you know, distilled spirit drinks, or natural or artificial flavoring extracts. Again, this is a very basic definition, and it is not limited to this specific definition. And then looking at how do we actually flavor vodka? There is a lot of different ways, and you know, we're gonna talk about it, and you know, while we taste specific samples. So you know, I'm just gonna go through it quickly. There is, you know, you can add flavoring extracts, as we already said, either natural or artificial. Then you know, you can add ferment on botanicals or ferment of fruits. Then vapor infusion in the column still, you know, drip distill it through a bag of botanicals if you like, or macerate and then redistill, or macerate after distillation. So, you know, David, you probably agree the list would go on probably.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And of course you can do combinations of different things, because the flavors that you'll get through distillation versus the flavors that you'll get through maceration will be different. And I think before we started, we were also talking about what is sometimes known as the Harrington method, which is this idea of using what you're proofing the vodka with to add some flavor. So for example, you could use cherry juice instead of water, or partly with the water, to add that flavor to your flavored vodka, and that will give you the flavor, but it might also give you some sweetness as well as reducing the ABV.
Yes, that's absolutely right, and I think we can agree that you know, the list is long for flavoring techniques in vodka, but I prepare a little classification panel just to make it a little bit more, well, just to make it clearer. And that the first one would be, you know, adding flavorings and extracts. The second style would be distilling, and the third one would be macerating. So, you know, those are the basics, but let's move on to tasting, and then we can actually, you know, go through different ways how you know, the vodka was flavored. So
I think it's probably important to note, just when we were talking about the methods, there's not a right way or a wrong way of doing it, and one way is not necessarily any better than any other, but it's probably, what I think is important is that you're clear about what you're doing. So if you are, in the same way that if you're making your own base spirit or not, I think it's reasonable to be clear about that. I think that's very helpful, but we can talk a bit about that as we go on. So what's up first, Veronika?
Yeah. So we are going to start with some nice flavored cucumber vodka from Minnesota in the US, so Prairie. So, and it is actually a good way to start, because you were talking about it is important that we know how it's been flavored, and this specific sample actually states on their label how they make it, that they, you know, add flavoring, natural flavoring, and they also add a little bit of salt, which I think is to, you know, enhance and make it taste like give it that freshness as you might.
So it's what you would probably, from a gin point of view, referred to as compounding, this idea of mixing the two things together. I think it's probably I think it's also whilst like you don't see as much flavored vodka in the UK anymore, when I was over in a liquor store in Missouri, so in the Midwest in the US, there was at least twice as much flavored vodka as there was gin.
Wow.
So it does, I mean, like, because we see so much gin here, and then you go something and you're like, wow, there is so many variations. And, you know, one brand might have 20 or 30 different SKUs. So flavored vodka is still big business in the US, even though it's kind of been a little bit more forgotten here. There's still places where it's very, very big. And a lot of those are compounded products.
Yes. Yes, I agree. So let's look onto this sample right away. You get that, you know, fresh cucumber on the nose, which is just fantastic. I think that it follows on. So what we can say about this sample, so this is actually neutral spirit is made from organic corn. So corn naturally gives the, you know, neutral spirits a little bit of sweetness.
Yeah.
So you not necessarily need to, you will still with the flavored vodka, obviously you will add some sugar sweetening, but you know, with this specific corn neutral spirit combines very well with the flavor of cucumber flavor. And that first, just what do you think about the sample?
Yeah, I think you're right. There's a nice refreshing element to it. I mean, I guess the thing is, when you are judging or tasting any flavor vodka, I know as the chair judge for the World Vodka Awards, as you are, the thing that we're looking for is, what is the flavor? Does it taste like what it says on the bottle? Like that's the first thing. That's like, before you even consider anything else, like, it says cucumber on the bottle. Does it taste like cucumber? And the answer is yes, yeah, definitely. And that's a big tick. And then I think there's a nice integration with the alcohol, and the mouthfeel is there, but it's got that intensity that it could be mixed, because I mean, these products are probably going to be mixed, aren't they? But I think it can stand up to some mixing.
With this specific sample, I mean, you're probably going to laugh, but I would just enjoy it on the rocks, you know, like, because there is so much of that cucumber flavor, which is really refreshing. That's what I would suggest.
Oh, I think nice. I think a highball as well would be really nice with it.
Oh yeah,
just very refreshing. So great. Well, that's a good start.
Yes, and so what we're going to mention with every sample. So this is a typical, you know, sample of flavored vodka with the technique of adding flavoring, adding natural flavoring. Yes, that's what we can agree on. So I think with every sample, we should say how we think it's been flavored. Yeah. So let's move on to the second sample, which is this fantastic Slovakian vodka Goro, which has been flavored with cranberry flavoring extracts, natural again. So what I can tell you about the brand, that I know that they make their own base spirit. And then obviously they source their natural flavoring for a specialist. And then obviously they flavor it at their distillery. So let's...
So wheat-based vodka, is it?
Yes. Winter wheat, yes. So again, when we looking at the base, wheat is known to be very, very neutral based spirits. So any flavoring you add, you know, it will just create that amazing flavor of what you're adding. So I think there is on the nose, there is quite a lot of sweetness right away. And with this, I think with this sample, you can tell right away it's flavored, because there is a lot of sugar coming through. And then there is that kind of like hint of cranberry at the end, but still, I think that's very powerful sweetness. What do you think?
There is a sweetness, thankfully, because of the cranberry. There's a slight dryness, and I guess like cranberry would be a very difficult thing to work with if you're going to do an infusion. It'd be a really hard thing to work with, because if you just got vodka and you put a load of cranberries in there and left it for a week or something and took the cranberries out, oh my goodness, it would be so tart, wouldn't it? You'd have a sip and you...
Yes.
So it is a question of the right technique for the right flavor. I think it would be interesting if you did a distillation like from a botanical point of view, but I don't know that you would get the intensity that you would get from the cranberries, partly because there's quite a lot of water in them, and that would make it difficult. I think you'd have to, if you were going to do it from a distillation point of view, maybe you would look at using dehydrated cranberries or something like that, so you weren't getting that water, and you might get a bit more intensity. But I've not tried it, but that would be my thinking anyway.
Yeah, and again, so this is another example of typical, you know, flavored vodka with adding natural sweetening, you know, flavoring extract, flavors. So that's another good. It's just good to have a variety and see, you know, what the flavor profile is like. And don't get me wrong, I tried a lot of flavored vodkas, even cranberry vodkas, which were overly sweet. That's all you could taste. And you know, I think with Goral cranberry, they just get it right, because you still get that kick from the base spirit and that sweetness that you want, but it's not overly sweet, like, you know, that's like just sugary. It's not. You still get a little bit of that character that you want. So let's move on to the next one. David, I'll let you introduce that one, because it's a Jaffa Cake vodka.
Here we go. This is from Atom in the UK. There we go, Jaffa Cake vodka. So I'll just read what it says on the front. It's a good place to start as any. It's 42% ABV, and it's a pure grain vodka blended with oranges, fresh orange peel, cocoa powder, and real life, no fooling Jaffa cakes. For those that don't know what a Jaffa cake is, it's a little, it is a cake. It's sort of a spongy cake at the bottom, and then it has a little bit of orange sort of jam, jelly kind of thing, and then it's covered in chocolate. So it's chocolate orange is really what the flavor is that you're looking for. And so the process of making this, they use a couple of different techniques. Imagine though, if you've got a biscuit, it's got a lot of, or cake, got a lot of sugar in it. So if you put that in your still normally, you're going to get some sort of burnt flavors. I once tried to make a biscuit or cookie for the Americans watching, flavored vodka, just a distillate. We used some bourbon biscuits, which are like a chocolate, a bit like an Oreo, but a little bit different. And we distilled it, because if you did an infusion, the flavor was fantastic. And then we thought, oh, we'll distill it, and that flavor will come through maybe. And then when we tasted it, it tasted like burnt biscuits, because of course all of the sugar had caramelized, and it made a real mess. And it was definitely a failure, but a very useful lesson. So what they use in here is they're using some cold distillation, like rotavap and things like that, so that the temperature for the distillation is a lot lower, so these things don't get cooked, and then they're blended together with the vodka there. So let's have a little.
Yeah.
So the nose is the cocoa. It's big, bold cocoa, and then you get like that little wisp, that oily sort of zesty orange on the nose as well.
Mm.
The taste is huge chocolate on the taste, like really nice. I mean, in some ways, even having this as a, you know, just having it as a chocolate kind of flavor vodka, I think would be so nice, because there's so many, your mind's racing. Oh, I could put it in this drink, I could put it in this drink, I could put it in that drink. But then you do get that sweetness, and then you get the orange, but none of it's overpowering. And I think actually the chocolate element of it is quite dry. And so I think partly the reason for choosing this is you're getting these different aspects because they've used different techniques, and there's a creaminess there as well.
And what would you say about the color? So let's look at the color, because we were talking about the color a little bit. So where does the color come from?
So I haven't got a definitive answer on exactly where the color comes from, but I think, like as we were saying before, it's important to have stability in products. And so for something like orange, for example, if you put orange peels in alcohol, it will take on some of that color, but that color will not last for very long. And so when that color fades, is not necessarily a great thing. So I think the use of additional colors, I don't think is always an issue. Sometimes it is a practicality of the way that you know, the thing has to be made, and for shelf stability. In many respects, you don't want something that's going to start looking not less appealing, I would say, after a while. So
Yes, yes, and so that's another good, sample that we can see. They used cold distilling as a type of, flavoring technique, which is very interesting. So
I
different
guess
to what we.
a word on the cold distilling would be that what you might also find, because it's a smaller still, you might have a more concentrated and powerful kind of flavor than if you were doing it on a larger still, at least relatively. And then that means that you only have to put quite a small amount in. So I mean, it's just one of these techniques. It's something to think about when you're making these sorts of products. And it's also like a really nice way of, if you've got somewhere where something's grown locally and you want to try it and see how that flavor comes across on in spirit, as it were, that's a good way of checking it out as well.
And I think with this particular sample, they did a really, really good job at capturing the real flavor of Jaffa cakes. And that's what you want, because as we already said, it says on the label, it's Jaffa cake. So when you open it, you expect it to taste like Jaffa cakes, and it does. So mission achieved.
Good stuff. And what's next?
So we've got a very interesting Polish sample from a distillery called Dworskie Raków. Yes, that's the one. A very fancy looking bottle. And it is actually...
An idea of the colour there as well.
Yes, flavored with plums and blackthorn. And this is another very good example because it's flavored via maceration. And I think we'll agree, David, that that's where the color comes from.
Yeah.
So the maceration. So. Yes.
And this probably, I mean, I've had it. This is this sort of orangey, ready sort of color. And I think over time you'll probably see this will fade and move more towards the oranges, less towards the sort of purpley colors. But that's a function of its the way that it's made. And I think it's a decision as a distiller you have to make. Which way do you want to go with that? It would be interesting to know a bit more of the detail about exactly how it was made in reference to if you've got the fruit that's being macerated in there, infused in it as you were. What ABV is that done at? Is it done at a lower ABV or is it done at a higher ABV? Often these things are done at a higher ABV because you extract more flavor. Is the sweetness done before or after? I mean, generally, if you were going to add some sweetness, I don't know that this necessarily does, but it might just be the fructose that's in there. But if you were thinking about adding a little bit of sugar just to round out the flavor of your flavored vodka, I would probably suggest doing it after you've done the infusion, because you're never going to be 100% sure how much of the sugar and the fructose is going to be extracted from the fruits from batch to batch. So I think that's probably, you'll have a better control doing it that way.
Yes, and what they disclose on their website, it says the production process is time consuming due to the initial months of maceration, followed by the maturing process, which connects the macerate with the distillate and lasts up to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So just to be more specific on the production process.
It's very nicely integrated, and I think often that is an indication of something that time has been taken over it. I mean, I think there's no spikiness, it's very flowing. You have the sweetness, there is the nuttiness, there's the fruitiness, but then the finish has got a lovely dryness, which is the blackthorn. I mean, that's
yes.
the
I even get woody notes, woodiness, or that kind of.
Yeah, exactly. And that might be something depending on exactly what. With some fruits you can leave the little stones in because there's not going to be a huge amount of cyanide or anything like that in there. Obviously with big fruits, you need to be more careful about such things. But so that might be actually from the pits, that might be somewhere that woody, almost slightly almondy note is, which is what you get when you make sloe gin. Is a similar thing. You're getting some of that woodiness coming through. And
also, I know that they add linden honey, which is very, very common in Eastern Europe, to use that as sweetening agent.
Okay,
so
that's where the sweetness is.
So I think you get those even on the nose right away. You get those honey notes.
The finish is almost reminds me a little bit of apple. It's got that dryness, that slight tartness of an apple. But yeah, and it was. I must check the.
When you say apple, I would maybe even say quince.
Yeah, I could see the quince. I could see the quince
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah,
Yeah, nice little sippable thing, but particularly you
very
could have
well
that in a nice sort of
executed.
hot toddy or something when it was cold, and that'd be quite
Oh,
delicious, wouldn't it?
yes,
So
absolutely. Oh, oh, I'll leave that for later. I'm gonna definitely finish this sample. All right, so let's move on to another very interesting sample, which is kind of, we came from Poland. So this is actually from Wales in the, well, UK, but it's got a Polish tradition. So I think it's a husband and wife duo, and the wife is Polish and husband is from Wales. So yeah, Four Feathers Botanical Vodka. So again, let's see what we get on the nose. But what we can say that what they state on the label or on their website. So it's kind of like, when I was mentioning like traditionally vodka was made for medicinal purposes, using a lot of different herbs that were infused. So this one specific sample, it uses 14 different botanicals, and which are distilled with pure grain spirit to bring out the absolute best in flavor. And those they don't say all of the botanicals they use, but it includes elderflower, oats, gorse, chamomile, coriander, cardamom, and citrus. So let's see what we get when we taste it.
I mean, it's a very complex product, and I think like if I was going to describe this, it might be an oversimplification, but this very much kind of it tastes like gin but without the juniper. I mean, that's essentially what it tastes like. You see coriander, cardamom, all these kind of flavors, they're classic gin botanicals. And then the oats, I think the oats is a really fascinating addition, because I think I'm surprised oats are not used more actually in distilled spirits, because they add a slight creaminess, and that lovely mouthfeel that you're getting, I'm pretty sure that's partly a function of the oats.
I was going to say oats definitely add creaminess, and you've got some lovely vodka, like non-flavored vodkas on the market that actually use oats as part of their base spirit, specifically for those reasons, to make it smoother and more creamy. But again, there is something quite expensive that to use.
True. Yeah. And I guess like with mixing this, I mean, this is one of these things where you think of any vodka drink and it's going to work really well. Think of any gin drink and it's going to work really well.
That is great. So now we're talking botanical vodka. This is a real expression of botanical vodka. So, and again, let's talk. Do you want to talk a little bit more about the way it's produced, because it's another good technique how you actually flavor and make botanical vodka.
So in most of the cases with the botanical vodkas, and we've got another two coming up, the spirit will be bought in from somewhere, third party, like nice high quality clean spirit, probably wheat, because as you said, Veronica, nice blank canvas. And then either the botanicals will be put in a pot still or something like that, and the alcohol's there. There might be a maceration, and then there's a distillation, and it takes those oils, those chemical compounds that you were talking about earlier that are in the botanicals, they're extracted. In some cases, people might do it individually. They might individually distill each botanical and then blend it together. But I mean, you can also do that with gin. So and then any technique that you can use in gin, you would be using for this. So you might use vapor infusion, where you put them in a botanical basket. You might use, as we discussed, the cold distillation, as we discussed earlier, and also the maceration that you do beforehand, before you do the distillation, to help bring out some more of the flavors. That will make a difference. So like there is, again, so many different permutations of how you can treat different botanicals. The one plus of doing things separately is that you can treat the botanicals in a little bit more of a bespoke way. So some botanicals don't necessarily work so well when they're really highly exposed to heat. Other botanicals don't necessarily work so well if they're trying to be extracted from very high alcohol. So like, for example, lemongrass actually works quite nicely extracted from water as opposed to being from alcohol. It's about, without getting too into the chemicals of it, it's about whether the flavors that you're trying to extract, whether they're soluble in alcohol or soluble in water, which kind of brings us back to the chemistry thing from before.
Absolutely, yes. So as we can see, and as we discussed, and there is so many different ways, that as you already mentioned, and we've been talking about that, it's just. I think the important thing to say is there is specific, like the way that are preferred when you're using botanicals, how to flavor vodka. Then there is certain techniques that are preferred if you're using a specific fruit, and anything else. So I think, it really depends what are you trying to achieve, and what flavor you're using to create flavored vodka, and then go from there. So that's important to consider even before you start.
Yeah. What have we got next, Veronica?
So we've got a Glasgow distillery G52 fresh citrus.
Yep.
Botanical vodka. So
this is fresh grapefruit, lemon, lime, and orange with hints of rosehip, ginger, and lemongrass. So this is botanical, made in the same way as the one that we've just been discussing. Again, from a distillery that also makes a very, very good gin. So they've kind of taken some of those views and that knowledge that they've gained and moved it to vodka, which I think is a really good thing. And I think it's also a good thing for gin as well, because if you want to be gin, you need to have the juniper, and make sure you're focusing on the juniper. If you want to do citrus, great, because distilled citrus is delightful, but call it a citrus vodka. And I think that's what they've done, and I think it's spot on, actually.
Oh, right away on the nose.
Very oily, very citrusy, but you're getting all of those different fruits. So you get that slight sharpness of the lime. There's that slight bitterness, floral note from the grapefruit. It's all there, which is lovely.
Definitely grapefruit, yeah. Even when you look at it, like the viscosity of it, that's the oiliness you kind of talking about.
Yeah, for sure. And that comes off in the palate, in the texture, when you're tasting it. I mean, you don't get a lot of some of those other ones that I was talking about, like the lemongrass and the ginger and the rosehip, but I can kind of just about sense their presence. They help to bulk it out a bit, round off the edges, and stop it from being overly citrus. One of the problems I think that you can get with anything that's citrus, any distilling of citrus, particularly when it's strong, is of course, certainly like, in the UK and in many other places, anything that strongly smells of citrus is often related to cleaning products. And that's the thing that you don't want to have. And just for absolute clarification, this doesn't smell like a cleaning product, but I think it's partly because that they've been a little bit more clever with their choice, and these subtleties that bring it beyond that. So I mean, if you just smell pure lemonine, it smells like a cleaning product, because that's what the smell
that's what you associate
it. Cleaning product, yeah, right. That's what they use. So.
And what would be interesting, actually? So this is a kind of citrus, but botanical vodka. Then we could, compare it to citrus, but flavored,
like a compounded one.
That we could see, because obviously even how it works, if you combine like flavored citrus vodka and then you add a lot of sweetness, how does it change the actual palate and everything, the body of the spirit and the product, where this is actually this is trying to retain that citrusy flavor and all the notes. So it would just, if you want to see the difference, what happens if you use a different technique, in order not just to add flavoring, add citrusy flavoring,
and there are good flavored, this sort of compounded, the flavoring added citrus vodkas out there, but a lot of the ones I have tried, you get an initial burst of citrus, it then drops off, and then you just kind of get like oily, slight acidity, the oily citrus that lingers, but you have this like void in the middle of it. And I think what's nice about this and the way of approaching it is that there is a real progression on the flavor. And actually, I mean, this is the point of this talk, really, isn't it? And it's basically to say there is some really fantastic craftsmanship that's going on in flavored vodka, and that's why it's worth having that second look.
Absolutely. And I think you remember we recently tried yuzu flavored vodka, which would fall into this category, and it was just as good. So when we're talking about flavored category as a whole, I think it is progressing, and it's not all just about, you know, as colorful as possible, as sweet as it gets. It's about actually retaining that character of the original ingredient that you want to flavor it with. And that's when you master, you know, the product. If you kind of achieve something like that, where it still tastes like real citrus.
Yeah. And then to finish up, we've got another one from Glasgow Distillery, haven't we? It's another botanical vodka. Here we go.
The coffee.
So this is rich coffee. So this is distilled with coffee beans, cocoa nibs, and tonka beans, and then fresh orange as well. So it's coffee, but there's a lot more going on with that. Again, made as a botanical vodka, distilling the botanicals.
Yes. So we assume it's been made the same way as the citrus one.
Yeah, it has done. Yeah, the last three are all made basically in the same way.
Yeah. Oh.
I mean, it's coffee on the nose. I mean, it goes back to that question: does it smell? Does it taste like what it says on the bottle? Yes.
Yes.
It's rich. It's dark coffee on the nose. I do get some of the orange coming through. I mean, we do know. I mentioned it, so I said that it was there, but you do get a little bit of that orange coming through as well.
That just tastes like freshly ground beans. I can't help it. Like, do you think I can add it to my iced coffee?
Turbocharge it a bit. Yeah. Well, I mean, you're getting the coffee, then the dark chocolate notes come in. So that's like a balance in it. I think there's that very light, slightly waxy, sweet spice that is the tonka bean, which is quite pleasant. And then just a little bit of orange. So and I think when you're thinking about flavored vodkas, yes, this is a coffee flavored vodka, but it's achieved by looking at a few other flavors as well. And I think that's important when you're looking at doing the recipe development, is maybe to have a slightly broader look of things and see how different ingredients can come together to produce your citrus or your coffee or whatever the thing is that you want to be. Don't be worried too much about just focusing on the one ingredient. You actually can build it up with some things where you think, well, actually, I might not have actually thought about putting orange in a coffee vodka. Orange isn't coffee, but it works.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I think this is a fantastic sample of what we call botanical vodka, the way that it's different to normal flavored coffee vodkas that you would expect, you know, and we've tried a lot of different coffee vodkas, but they are mostly colored. They have a lot of sugar added, you know, and then there is some sort of coffee flavor detectable, but this is completely different, and that still falls into flavored category, but it's completely different. So that's why we're here today, talking and making it clear that, you know, there is no flavor vodka like the other, you know, like they are not the same. If we're talking about botanical, I think that's why we need to develop it more as a kind of like separate category. In a way, it still falls into flavored category, but it's, you know,
a subsection. Yeah. And I think that, I mean, that coffee vodka in a White Russian or something, double down on the coffee in a White Russian, it could be quite delightful.
Absolutely. Yes.
Good.
So that's all our samples today, and I think I can say they were all very, very specific and very good in what they're saying they are.
Yeah.
And you know, we looked at few different you know, techniques and ways of flavoring. We can agree, I mean, there is a legal definition of flavor vodka, but what falls within the category, and you know, it's not very clear. So I think there should definitely be more discussion about this topic.
Sure. And speaking of the discussion, we will also be having, as we did with the previous Virtual Expo, a live Q&A session with Veronika and I. So if you've got your questions, you can ask your questions there and we can have a bit more of a discussion. But until then, I'd like to say thank you so much to Veronika for giving us so much of her time and sharing her knowledge. And thank you for watching, and we'll see you again. Cheers.
Thank you, guys. Take care.